If I list the effects to improve the audio in the proper order, it will be Normalize, DeNoise, Parametric Equalizer, and then compressor. The compressor is a complex effect to configure and is often misunderstood. It is mainly used to increase overall loudness. Though it is used to increase overall loudness, it does not work the same way in every part of the audio. In theory, a compressor effect decreases the gap between the loudest and softest audio. This gap is called the dynamic range. A compressor reduces the dynamic range. So, a complete sentence will be like a compressor that increases the overall loudness by decreasing the dynamic range. However, all these are theories. So let's understand this through a practical demonstration. Go to Effects, then Amplitude and Compression, and you'll see several compression effects. We are interested in the Dynamics effect. We'll use the compressor under Dynamics because it's easy to use and easy to configure. When you click on Dynamics, you'll see the configuration window. It has three main controls: Auto Gate, Compressor, and Expander. For voiceover-related tasks, we usually do not use an expander or an auto gate. So we'll only be using the compressor here. Instead of configuring everything manually, I'll use a preset. There are several presets, and the one I recommend for voiceover is the soft compression. It is not necessary to use the soft compression as is, but it can be a starting point. When you select soft compression, there are attack and release settings. These are automatically configured for voiceover. We need to adjust some settings, but we will go into the details later. Let's now listen to the audio with this soft compression preset. I'll toggle the compressor on and off with the toggle button while I play so you can hear how different the sound becomes with compression.
Some people claim that all aerators are created equal. Well, we beg to differ. Ranchworks Pasture aerators are engineered with forged ranch tech blades designed to penetrate deeper and aerate more effectively than any other aerator on the market, with a lifetime guarantee against breakage to back it up. Weight, cutting surface, and speed set us apart. Visit ranch.com to see why ranch aerators are cut above the rest.
You just listened to the audio. The difference may not be that big or even subtle, and sometimes that happens because of the recording, and sometimes because of the configuration. So, to clearly understand that, I want to show you the difference in the waveform before and after applying the compression. I will apply these compression settings. These are exactly the soft compression settings. I have not changed anything. I will show you the ideal configuration in a moment, but before that, let me show you the key difference. The waveform you see now is the waveform after applying the compression settings. From the history, we can confirm that the waveform we are seeing now indicates that this is the waveform after applying the dynamics effect. I can easily go back to another point in my editing, so I can switch back and forth between the waveform I got after the parametric equalizer and after I apply the dynamics. As I switch, you can see there are some differences in the waveform, and the waveform after applying the dynamics looks fuller and rounder. This is the waveform after applying that parametric equalizer. Notice the gap between the loudest point and the softer talks in the waveform. There is a gap, and when I actually go to the waveform after applying the dynamics or the compressor settings, you can see that gap between the louder and softer talks has been reduced. The primary purpose of the compressor effect is to reduce the gap between louder and softer speech, so the overall audio sounds smoother to listen to. Without compression, we can sometimes hear the loud audio clearly, but we cannot hear the softer tones comfortably. After applying that compression, both the louder and softer parts of the audio can be heard comfortably. From my discussion so far, we actually understand what the compressor does, but we do not actually have any clear action points like how to actually configure the compressor, or when we know that we have actually used the proper compressor configuration. Well, to do that, you have to use a tool called Amplitude Statistics. If you go to Window and Amplitude Statistics, you will see some numbers appear on the left side. There is no number at this moment, but if I scan, then you will see the numbers. You can see some numbers just before applying the compressor effect. In history, we are in the Parametric Equalizer. Just after applying the Parametric Equalizer and before the compressor, the peak is around -3. The peak is exactly -3.36, and the total RMS is -23.27. These two are important numbers, peak and total RMS, because after compression, we expect the RMS to increase. That increase has to be measured against the peak. For example, if two audio have the same peak level, then we can compare their RMS. If any audio has a lower peak than the other, then the RMS calculation is actually not correct. If two audio files have different peak levels, and then we compare the RMS of those two audio files, then that will not be a correct measurement. The main point is that when you are comparing the RMS values of the two audio, you have to make sure the peak amplitudes are kind of the same. For now, note that the peak is around -3 and the RMS is around -23, and that is before applying the compressor. If I go to the stage where I have applied the compressor by selecting the dynamics in the history and scan again, then I can see some updated numbers. In this update, the peak is around -3.69, slightly below what it was before, but that is still around -3. As both the audio before and after compression have the peak level around -3, we can compare the RMS level now. You can see the RMS is around -20, so it was -23 before applying the compressor. After applying the compressor, the RMS has become around -20. That means after playing the compressor, the RMS has increased. We have got the desired outcome after applying the compressor. This RMS amplitude has to be in the range of -18 to -23. This is from ACX audio requirements, though this is for audiobook audio requirements. If you are in this range, -18 to -23, then your audio is expected to have a comfortable loudness level. If you are doing a voiceover or an audiobook, it doesn't matter. You should follow the ACX audio requirements guidelines, especially on points like RMS. You also need to understand that audio at -18 decibels RMS is louder than audio at -23 decibels RMS. When you actually need to increase overall loudness, you have to think about adjusting the RMS. That's how we make the decision whether our compressor settings are getting us to the desired RMS level. Let's learn the proper way to configure a compressor to get the desired RMS level. First, I'll go back to the stage where no compressor has been applied to this audio. Using the history panel, I've switched back to the parametric EQ, which means no compression is currently affecting this audio. To apply the compressor, I'll go to Effects, then Amplitude and Compression, and select Dynamics. One of the key parameters is the threshold. The threshold determines the point on the waveform at which compression becomes active. Right now, it's set to -12.3. If you imagine an invisible line at -12.3 across the waveform, any audio above that line will get compressed. That's what the threshold does. So when you increase or decrease the threshold, you're controlling how much of the audio gets compressed. For example, if I set it to -2.3 and imagine a line at that level, you'll notice that none of the audio crosses the threshold. When that happens, the compressor has no effect at all. This is why setting the threshold correctly is so important. Next is the ratio. After setting the threshold, the ratio defines how much compression gets applied to the parts of the waveform that cross the threshold. I'll come back to the ratio in a moment. Here's a helpful tip. Whenever the compressor is active, this meter will light up. The more red that fills the meter, the more your audio is being compressed. Let me play the audio and adjust the threshold so you can see this in action.
Some people claim that all aerators are created equal. Well, we beg to differ. Ranchworks Pasture aerators are engineered with forged wrench tech blades designed to penetrate deeper and aerate more effectively than any other aerator on the market, with a lifetime guarantee against breakage to back it up. Weight, cutting surface, and speed set us apart. Visit ranch.com to see why Ranch aerators are cut above the rest.
As I lower the threshold, more of the audio gets compressed, and the red area grows. As I raise the threshold, less audio is compressed, and the red area shrinks. Now, how much compression should you aim for? As a general guideline, a standard threshold range is between -12 and -18. The more compression you need, the lower you set the threshold. There's no golden rule here. It really depends on the audio you're working with. But if you follow this process, setting the threshold somewhere between -12 and -18 will give you decent compression most of the time. The ratio controls how much compression is applied. For voiceover, a standard value is somewhere between 2 and 4. If you want just a little compression, set the ratio closer to 2. If you want more, move it toward 4. But keep in mind, the more compression you apply, the more your audio can start to sound different. Heavy compression can change the sound completely, so you should avoid applying too much. So that's how you configure the threshold and ratio. Now let me put all the learning so far into action and set a proper configuration. To recap, start with the soft compression preset, then set your threshold. Somewhere between -12 and -18 works most of the time. For this audio, I'll set the threshold to -14.6, and if I find I'm not getting the result I want, I can simply undo the compression and try a different threshold or ratio. For the ratio, I'll set it to 2.9. Now, a quick word of caution. You can't blindly follow these exact settings every time. It always depends on your specific recording. So instead of blindly following this configuration, use it as a starting point, then judge how your audio sounds. Based on how it sounds and how it is affecting the RMS, you may need to adjust the compressor settings. For this particular audio, I will use these settings. I will apply this. As I apply the compression, you can see that the differences between the loud and quiet parts of the waveform have been reduced. The audio now looks much more uniform. If I scan it, we can see the updated peak and RMS values. Right now, the RMS is at -22 and the peak is at -6. But this isn't giving us the standard reading we're looking for. To get a true measurement of the RMS, we need the peak to be at -3. So what I'll do is normalize this audio to -3 decibels. I'll go to Favorites and normalize it. After normalizing, I need to scan again to get the updated values. Always keep in mind, whenever you see this warning icon, it means the reading no longer reflects the current waveform. So let me scan again. Now I'm getting the updated values. The peak is now at -3.01 and the RMS is at -18.6. I've successfully increased the RMS of this audio using compression, giving us an overall louder result. So that's the basics of configuring compressor settings. You'll need to experiment a bit on your own with your specific audio, but the configuration I've shown you here will work in most cases. I also have another video about what I call the compressor sandwich, where I go into more depth. You can watch that video by clicking the card on the screen.